Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to do a race per se, but I am going to be driving some old cars around tracks, basically talking about them. Because if you're a motorsport fan, you've obviously heard the news that Sir Frank Williams has very tragically passed away this week, just before the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And I thought best way I could pay tribute to him is by telling you his story and driving some of the machines that he was responsible for and how he shaped the world of Formula One and the world of motorsport. So yeah, I thought I'd tell you his story. And it starts a long, long time ago, back in 1969. So the story of Frank Williams, particularly in Formula One, started in 1969, which this is one of the cars. This isn't one of the ones that he was responsible for. This is Jackie Stewart's Matra. I couldn't find a Brabham, but Frank was pretty much the engineer and car part dealer for the British driver Pires Courage, and together they managed to sell parts to Brabham and get Pires to drive in the 1969 season. And this is where Frank Williams' career sort of started. Blimey. There's not much grip in these. Oh, blimey. This is where it started, back in the late 60s, early 70s. It still wasn't his own team, but he was at least supplying stuff to drivers, putting a driver forward and supplying the Brabham team. However, as was the case in the 1960s and 1970s, Frank would be hit with the first bit of devastating news and the tragedies of Formula One very early on in the career. At Zandvoort, this version of Zandvoort, in 1970, Pires Courage was driving a Brabham, and very similar to what I've done there. I didn't do that intentionally because that's poor taste, but very similar to what I did there. Pires crashed here at Zandvoort and tragically died.
Before the end of the race, an ominous column of smoke far across the dunes hung over the scene of the fatal accident to Pires Courage and the Frank Williams de Tommaso. Pires was a close friend of Jochen. The pain on the winner's face as he mounted the rostrum was all too obvious.
With the accident. So that was sort of the first shock for Frank, having a driver be killed in one of his cars. Even though it was technically a Brabham, it was still a car that he had made and he'd put together, and it was a driver he was very, very close with. He'd got Pires into Formula One. So this is sort of the first dark part of the Williams history. But as callous as it is, that was the world of Formula One back then in the 1960s, 1970s. Drivers got killed. It was almost expectant. Amazingly, Frank would only ever have one other driver be killed in one of his cars. I will get on to that one. But this is the first car, more or less the first car, and his first few seasons. He would then go on to create his own team. So Frank would create his own team and would be called Williams, after himself. I think they played about with loads of names and they were like, Frank, you're the main man, so just name it after yourself. Okay, I'll take the banking. I'll go this way. So Frank continued throughout the 1970s and had created a handful of teams. This is one of the cars. This is the 1976 Williams. and they were genuinely on the grid. However, the issue was during this period, the cars weren't great. They were a bit slower. In fact, if you go and watch the Williams documentary, I wholeheartedly ask you to go and watch the Williams documentary. It's fantastic. But if you go and watch that documentary, there is an interview with Ginny before she passed away, and she basically said in the 70s there was a saying amongst team contracts: if you want to ruin your career, you drive a Williams. That was the attitude towards the team in the 70s, and it was sort of true. The cars were bad, and Frank was struggling with money. Famously, Ginny gave him some money to go out and buy fish and chips, and he returned with a couple of spark plugs because he'd been given money. So that's how tight it was, and he eventually sold to Walter Wolf. So this car is actually not just a Williams, this is a Wolf Williams, and then the following year would be a Wolf. It would actually go on, I believe, in 1977 to win a race, but not at the hands of Frank. However, Frank's luck will change. He re-established his team, called it Williams Engineering Racing, I think, or Williams Engineering. Signed Patrick Head as its technical director. Where's the old Maggots Becketts go? And they slowly got back up on their feet towards the end of the 70s. And in fact, in 1979 at Silverstone, Clay Regazzoni in this car would win the British Grand Prix. Frank's first win was at home. And then, almost unbelievably, in the following year, in a pretty much identical car, Aussie Alan Jones would take this car and become world champion. The first champion of the 1980s, and Frank was there to dominate. They also dominated in 81, and Keke Rosberg would go on to win the championship again for them in 82. The Williams team were now pretty much unstoppable. And only at that point, I'm not used to these 80s cars. But so much at this point, they'd had some established drivers like Clay Regazzoni, but Alan Jones was somewhat not as... What am I trying to say? Alan Jones wasn't as well known at the time. Well, I guess he was. Same with Keke Rosberg. But what Frank really needed to be completely unstoppable was two absolutely undeniably great drivers in his car. And for the mid-80s, it's exactly what Frank got. For 1986, he would have two of the greatest drivers in Formula One history race for him as teammates. They famously didn't get on. You had Brazilian Nelson Piquet and Brummie Nigel Mansell. And the car seemed pretty much unstoppable. And this is where the second bit of tragedy for the Williams family and the Williams team came in. If you can recognise it, this is Paul Ricard. In March 1986 or 87, I can't remember, I think it was 86. They were doing tests. They were doing winter testing here. This is back when teams could just sort of go and test whenever they wanted. And they were testing the cars here, and it was very positive. But Frank and Peter Windsor, I believe, both needed to leave the area and get to the nearest airport and fly back to England desperately. And Frank, being a racer at heart, got in his car. They left the circuit. It was a windy road away from the circuit. Frank drove slightly too fast, and he crashed and broke his neck. thankfully, I believe there was a couple of paramedics, sort of a couple of off-duty doctors following him. They were able to stabilise him. He got taken to a French hospital, where the French went, we don't know, there's nothing we can do to save him. In which Bernie Eccleston went, nah, the frogs ain't killing Frank. And Bernie paid through the nose to get Frank to a top London hospital, in which they were able to save him. Although, he did have to become a paraplegic, I believe is the phrase. In fact, he was originally deemed a quadriplegic. He couldn't move anything below the neck. However, Frank, in his resilience, went, at least let me be able to push my own wheelchair, and forced himself to be able to move his shoulders so he could push his own wheelchair. He shouldn't have been able to push his shoulders. He shouldn't have been able to, but he did. He was that resilient. Now, if you want to see what a round of applause looks like, you need to see how the crowd reacted when Frank returned to Formula One. He got out of hospital and he came to Brands Hatch to see the team. And the entire circuit of Brands Hatch just lit up and applauded him. Unfortunately, Frank wouldn't be there the whole weekend. He got too tired. He was there for like the Friday, I think, and I think he attempted to be there for qualifying, but couldn't actually do it. However, beautifully, and sort of in a great tribute for him, Nigel Mansell would go on to win that race in this car around Brands Hatch. Mansell wouldn't do that. But Mansell would go on to come across this line and win for Frank on the weekend that he returned. And there was a beautiful moment up there on the podium where normally it was the team principal that would go up and collect the winner's trophy. Frank couldn't be there, but instead his wife Ginny went up and collected the trophy on his behalf. And that was significant because it was the moment that Ginny finally understood why Frank did this. She'd always somewhat been against it and was like, I don't get it, it's just boys and toys and he just wants to go fast and it's almost killed him, I don't get it. And then she stood on the podium. There's a beautiful photograph, I'll try and find it. She stood on the podium and held up the constructor's trophy. And it's just at that moment that she realised, that Frank's wife realised, this is why he does it. And this is why he keeps going. And this is why everyone loves Frank. Adoring, beautiful moment. And of course here at Brands Hatch is, well, I can't do that corner. But Frank then had the respect of loads of drivers. He had Mansell in his car. Mansell would leave, but Mansell would also come back. Oh my god, this thing sounds incredible. But we now came into the 90s. Williams team, alright, during the late 80s, the Williams team sort of struggled to match the dominance that was the McLarens and try to find a way to beat Ayrton Senna. But then at the hands of Frank Williams, Adrian Newey and Patrick Head and Nigel Mansell, boop, they came up with this amazing thing. The Williams FW14B. I don't know why I picked Monaco, I just realised I should have picked Silverstone because of the iconic line that I love from Murray. Also another soul F1's lost recently. Still remember the commentary, out of Luffield 1 into Luffield 2, which is the last corner, but one, they're breaking ranks, the Union Jacks are waving, and Nigel Mansell wins the 1992 British Grand Prix in terrific style. I'm aware I've picked Monaco. I forgot that was a moment. But Mansell obviously would go on to win the championship, his only championship, and they would have one of the best cars in history. And that's a feature, because I've forgotten the name of pretty much all the other cars. Everyone remembers the FW14B, and all Williams cars, even the ones today, are named the FW whatever. I think we're on like the FW38 or something like that for the 2021 car. Obviously FW standing for Frank Williams. So even the cars today, even after they sold the team, the cars are still the FW something. This obviously doesn't have a Monaco steering rack on it. But Williams would be a dominant force. The following year in 93, Alain Prost would go on to win his final championship in a Williams. And then they would sign a god as their next driver. The driver Frank regarded as a god. They would sign Ayrton Senna. However, as most of us know, that does also became another dark part in the Williams history. I don't need to tell the story, but it is incredibly difficult. I can't tell you how actually physically difficult it is to drive this car around that corner. This is obviously the FW16, which is the 1994 Williams, driven by the greatest driver in Formula One, a hero in Brazil, and a legend in sport in general, driven by Ayrton Senna. However, the team really struggled with the new regulations about not having electronic to help them. I mean, you can see how much I'm struggling with this, particularly compared to like the FW14. Oh God, this is a real handful, particularly compared to the 92 car that I was driving around Monaco. This is a real handful, and you know, they still suspected the Benettons of having a bit of traction control, and of course Michael Schumacher was making a name for himself. But I mean, I don't need to dwell on it too much. I actually recreated the 94 race in a season. I drove the 94 cars. I'll leave the link up in the top. But there's what I think is a really nice tribute to Senna on there. But yeah, this was obviously Senna's last corner. Incredibly difficult to do this. It hurts me every time going around that corner. But until this week, that was the last sort of big tragedy for the Williams team, thankfully. Other than the selling up in 2020? 2019, 2020? So 2020. But the Williams team would then, unfortunately, no, the Williams team would carry on. I almost forgot. The Williams team would bounce back. I mean, Damon Hill would wrestle this car to the final round in Adelaide and face off against Michael Schumacher. See, I've got the hang of the thing now, he says. But yeah, Damon Hill will wrestle this to the end of the championship and fight Michael Schumacher in the final race to try and win the championship. They would lose out to Schumacher again in 95. But then in 96, Damon Hill will get his wish.
And Damon Hill exits the chicane and wins the Japanese Grand Prix. And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
Of course, Williams would keep dominating throughout the mid-90s. Damon will fight back and finally beat Michael Schumacher and win the championship in 1996. They would also go on to win the championship in 1997. However, beyond that, they would then end up losing Adrian Newey to McLaren. He would go over to McLaren, and of course would make is the MP19? I can't. No, is the MP19? Yeah, I think it is. Whatever, the 98 and 99 McLarens that Mika Hakkinen won in. And of course, Adrian Newey would go on, make a lot of the cars for McLaren throughout 2000s, and then would go to Red Bull, and is still making the Red Bulls that we see today. But that's the point as well, is that not only did the team did start to suffer. This is the 96 car. The 97 car would be their last championship, but they won 16 championships. The team, they won 16 championships. They are one of 3 teams to have a heritage bonus. So that is a financial bonus that the FIA give to the teams, basically to encourage us to stay. That heritage bonus goes to Williams, McLaren and Ferrari. No one else. Shows how long they've been here. But also, with the respect of Adrian Newey, they brought Adrian Newey to Formula 1. They also brought Patrick Head to Formula 1. In 1996, in this car, they brought over the 1995 IndyCar champion. They brought over Jacques Villeneuve and had Jacques Villeneuve race for them and win immediately. He would then go on to win in his second season. And they would continue to bring in new talent. Oh, who doesn't love a 2000s V10 car? But this is the 2000s Williams. And this was the car that gave Jenson Button his first ever drive. So not only did they bring in talented mechanics and designers, they brought in great new driver talent as well. They gave David Coulthard his first drive. They gave Jenson Button his first drive. They gave Nico Rosberg, Nico Hulkenberg their first drives. So many great talents came through Williams. Very sadly, for later in the 2000s, when this Williams particularly wasn't the greatest, it didn't really fight for anything. But then later in 2001, 2002, etc., sort of up until like 2006, really, they were at the front fighting, particularly with Montoya. They gave Montoya his first drive. The only team, no, it's not the only team. I was going to say the only team Montoya was with. That's a lie. He went to McLaren. But they gave Juan Pablo Montoya his first drive as well. And it was Montoya and Ralph Schumacher in the Williams that, were the ones that could actually bring a fight to Ferrari and to Michael Schumacher. During the early 2000s, during their dominant period, they were the only team that could come anywhere close. There was going to be a point where Jenson Button would have stepped into that car, but BAR blocked it, unfortunately. But they had a great successful run throughout the early and mid 2000s. We get to the late 2000s, and like I said, they'd start bringing in new talent like Nico Rosberg. They partnered him with Mark Webber, and then they would bring in people like I think Alexander Wirtz and Nico Hulkenberg. They bring him in for 2010. But unfortunately, the team would sort of fall into that sort of dip that a lot of teams go through, where they end up having a poor season, they get less money, so they can't progress, so then they end up having a worse season following year. And they would sort of do that 2010, 2011, they'd sort of fall back down the grid. And then no one, and I mean no one, would have expected what happened in 2012. I remember actually watching this race. Pastor Maldonado in qualifying set a lap time, and everyone went, okay, that's sort of, Maldonado's normally like P8. That's sort of a benchmark for like where P8 will be. And then neither Ferraris could beat that time. Nor could either of the Red Bulls. Nor could Jenson Button in the McLaren. I remember watching and I remember David Croft suddenly turning and everyone, the penny dropped after pretty much everyone failed to beat Maldonado's time around Circuit de Barcelona, and everyone just went, okay, wow, that was an incredible lap from Maldonado. That's because everyone was expecting him to be P8 and they thought that's where he was. They thought everyone would just go a lot faster. Oh no, Pastor Maldonado would somehow put his car second on the grid behind Lewis Hamilton. It would then turn out that Lewis Hamilton was underfueled and had to start at the back of the grid, putting Pastor Maldonado in a Williams on the front row. In fact, P1. And the only person that could really hold a fight to him the entire Grand Prix, Mark Webber had a go in the Red Bull. And don't forget, this is 2012, so the Red Bull was dominant. The only other person that could have done it, that fought with him, was home hero Fernando Alonso in the Ferrari. And they fought, and it was such a tough battle. But somehow, Pastor Maldonado, famed for crashing, he somehow managed to hold off Fernando Alonso and win the Spanish Grand Prix for Williams. An absolutely incredible moment. What made it more special? It was also Frank Williams' 70th birthday. What a birthday present. Your team hasn't won a race since like the early to mid 2000s. You're getting on to like 8 years of not having won a race. And then out of nowhere, the driver ends up winning a race. They were so happy and thrilled that while celebrating in the garage after the race, the garage caught fire. Yeah, that happened. Something, I'm sure it wasn't them celebrating, but the garage did catch fire. No one was hurt. But that, straight up, I'd only just gotten back into Formula 1, and that told me sort of the camaraderie and the love between all the teams. So I remember seeing the shots of the Williams garage in that pit lane being on fire, and seeing Toro Rosso mechanics just running in and grabbing whoever they could and pulling them out, and Caterham mechanics running in with fire extinguishers. It was great to see everyone working together, and you know, I mean that's obvious. Like no one wanted anyone to get hurt, but it was just a scary moment in the end, but a great moment to see everyone coming together to help each other, particularly after celebrating Sir Frank's 70th, and they delivered him the best present by winning the race. This would be the last time a Williams would win a race. They have gotten very close though. Whoops! That's a very Maldonado thing to do. That's a very Maldonado thing to do. The Williams team would actually hit the nail on the head for the beginning of the hybrid era. In fact, the Williams team were the first ones to come up with the whole the hybrid system, the ECU and things like that. They would, not the ECU, whatever the hybrid system. Williams would actually come up with it. They wanted to use it instead of KERS back in the 2010s. So they managed to jump onto the hybrid thing pretty quick. And in 2016, they finished third in the championship. A lot of people forget that. But in 2016, Williams finished third in the championship. In fact, at Silverstone, they had a 1-2 start. They started P1, P2 with Felipe Massa and Valtteri Bottas, who they also gave their first drive to. I've also realised as well that they've given quite a few legendary last drives to particularly a lot of Brazilian drivers. They gave the last drive to Massa, last drive to Barrichello. I don't want to say they gave a last drive to Senna. They might have given a last drive to PK. I'm not sure either. But also, let's not forget, 2017 at Baku. Oh, Williams just passed me a Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas, just passed Lance Stroll and nipped P2 off of him for the second place in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, or the European Grand Prix, I can't remember which one it was. But they'd get a podium. Lance Stroll would start in the team, and they would have they'd get a podium in Azerbaijan. And can I take a moment to remind you that they brought back this amazing, iconic livery of the Martini branding. I forgot how cool the Martini livery looks. And of course, the legacy will continue, and the cars are the cars from then on did unfortunately get quite bad, and the Williams team would spend a number of years at the back of the grid. Frank would semi-retire and hand over the business to his daughter Claire. And they would struggle at the back, but as we've seen, 2020 they made great steps forward, and then 2021, for the first time in a very long time, in Hungary, they scored points, and that was so great that it moved George Russell to tears. And then, of course, at the Belgium Grand Prix. The Belgian Grand Prix 2021, George Russell put in an astonishing lap around Spa-Francorchamps and would put his car provisionally on pole position, only for it to be taken away by Max Verstappen. Grr, I was annoyed by that. But of course, if you remember the Belgian Grand Prix 2021, or if you don't, I don't blame you, because it rained. They delayed the race, they delayed the race, they delayed the race, they delayed the race. They did 3 sighting laps, and then they cancelled the race. Took 4 hours for them to decide to do that. No one changed any positions, which meant George Russell in a Williams got P2. And Williams got a podium after years of trying. Their last podium was, I think, 2017. And then they managed to get there, and the team has continued to thrive. Yeah, they had to sell the team, and it's now owned by Dobita, something like that. I can't remember, a Canadian business firm. But they've the new firm has offered, yes, has honoured it, even not offered. Like, yeah, we'll keep the team name. It'll still be called Williams. All the cars will still be called the FW whatever. And the legacy lives on. The cars are still doing well. The Williams are comfortably 8th at the moment in the championship, and amazingly not that far behind Aston Martin. I think they're not that far behind Aston Martin in the championships. Just like, if you think that Racing Point, as they were last year, were fighting for McLaren, it says how quickly that team's declined. But Williams are very quickly moving up the ladder, and they're just going to get a hell of a lot more money. They're going to be able to develop an even better car. So the team lives on, even without Frank. The team still goes. I know there's going to be lots and lots of tributes towards him this weekend and something special at the Grand Prix with. They're doing sort of pretty much what I've done in Saudi Arabia. They're going to drive a bunch of historic F1 cars around, and apparently there's some very, very special drivers going to be taking part, but I don't know what else to say other than no, thank you, Frank. You created a very beloved team. I don't know anyone who isn't rooting for Williams at the moment. Again, it's the proper, maybe it's because I'm British, it's a British team and we like an underdog story. And that's what Williams is, it's an underdog story. It was a man who just loved passion for cars, just bought and sold what he could, worked his way to Formula One, still did that with the teams, had to sell up and then came back and thrived. And then the team struggled through the 70s, they struggled in the 70s, they struggled in the late 80s, they struggled in the late 90s, they struggled in the late 2010s, and they struggled in the late 2000s and the sort of early 2010s. They had a good few moments, but they're on the way back up, and it's absolutely wonderful to see. It's a fabulous team. Yeah. If you haven't already, I incredibly urge you to go and watch the Williams documentary. It's just called Williams. Might be on Netflix. I don't know if it is or not. If not, it might be on Amazon Prime. Go and watch it. It's incredibly insightful. Will probably bring you to tears. Yeah, but like I said, all I can say is thank you, Frank, for Sir Frank Williams. I think he was a Sir anyway, but thank you, Frank, for the amazing team, the amazing drivers that you brought into Formula One, the amazing mechanics, the amazing designers. Such a pioneer for the sport. No, I said when he had his accident, Bernie Eccleston was in charge, and he paid through the nose to get Frank proper medical care in London. And Frank didn't let the fact that he was a paraplegic stop him. He just continued and was like, no, I'm gonna keep going. So I don't think anyone had a nasty word to say about Frank. So, thank you.